With threats to our nation waiting around every corner, adaptability is more important than ever. When conditions change without notice, quick strategic thinking is crucial. And with obstacles consistently impending, determination is essential in overcoming them. It's this willingness, decisiveness, and resilience that sets Marines apart. With our fighting spirit, we don't just fight battles, we win them. Marines are the constant our nation counts on to fight the unknown. And through adaptable problem solving, we do just that. Learn more at marines.com.
We get into this routine as coaches, and having been a head coach, I know I did it, where you follow the same practice plan every week. And the reality is that football is not played that way. So I think you can be creative within your own practice plans, having the flexibility within your own thought process and planning of what do we need to do this week to help prepare our guys the best for what they're going to see. It might be totally different than what you did last week.
Joining us again on the podcast is Jaime Elizondo, who has coached both at the college and professional level, serving as offensive coordinator for the XFL San Antonio Brahmas for the 2022 and 2023 seasons, after serving as head coach for the CFL Edmonton Elks in 2022. He served as an offensive coordinator in both the XFL and CFL and has experience at the NFL, college, and high school levels. In addition to being a graduate of the University of Maryland, he holds a law degree from the Washington College of Law at American University. He joined us in 2022 for OC Office Hour and provided useful insight and ideas. I will link that episode in the description. In this episode, he provides a wealth of ideas that he's learned over his 20-plus year career, and you will definitely find these helpful right now as you're in season. What you see on tape is a direct reflection of what you teach and how you teach. Video is important, but if you don't teach well, you're not going to like what you see on your video. First Down Playbook has been helping coaches teach better for 13 years. It allows you to present installs, playbooks, and practice cards in half the time with NFL quality. Coaching tools like video pairing, a player app, practice schedules, and wristband sheets have made First Down Playbook a program management system with everything in one place. If you're in a position of leadership with your football program, receive a free 1-week look at First Down Playbook. Call them at 512-814-6158 or visit them on their website or social media. Mention Coach and Coordinator Podcast or use the coupon code COACH24 to receive a $100 discount off the normal $700 First Down Playbook team membership price. Links and the phone number are in the show notes. As coaches, we know that some of the biggest hurdles to our team's success can come from off the field. Your team needs support to tackle the endless list of expenses, uniforms, training equipment, travel, and more. But raising that money can feel like a full-time job. Thankfully, there's Vertical Raise. Vertical Raise is the premier online fundraising platform using innovative technology to create the easiest and most efficient system available. Raise more money in less time with a local fundraising coach who works with your team every step of the way to customize the ideal fundraiser. With options for online donations, digital discount cards, premium product sales, and even spirit shops, Vertical Raise has top-of-the-line solutions for every fundraising style. To find out more, visit verticalraise.com and we'll get you connected with an exclusive offer on your first fundraiser. We're getting deep into the second half of the season here, and so there's a lot of things to consider when you're thinking about moving your offense forward, preparing for some of these big games coming, even for a playoff run. And joining me to discuss all of those is XFL Offensive Coordinator Jaime Elizondo. Coach, great to have you back on the podcast.
Great to be here, man. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to do this again, excited to hear your voice. It's been too long, brother, and I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, so Coach, a ton of things to unpack at this time of the year. Let's start with the idea of the workload on your players, right? As you're getting into, high school, maybe it's week 6, 7, college 8, 9, a little bit longer on the season, making sure that you have these guys the whole way through is important. And guys always think about, well, do I shorten practice? How do I do things? And I think there's a lot of different ways you can do it. But for you, just thinking of that, what are some of the things you like to focus on to make sure that your guys are fresh on game day?
Yeah, it's a great question. And start off by saying that, I'll share this. When I was working for Doug Marone, he had an expression that was pretty accurate, regardless of the level that you're coaching at. He said every day that as the season goes on, as coach walks into the building, he wants to do a little bit more. And every day that the season goes on and a player walks into the building, he wants to do a little bit less. So, there's always that conflict of wanting to put in, more wrinkles or, new plays, new concepts. But I think it's, in today's game, it is a balance of keeping guys fresh and not only physically fresh. The game is so physical and so much more, played at a higher level nowadays than when we played it. But I think there's two components to that, right? Physically staying healthy, managing the right number of reps in practice, enough so that your team is prepared as the big, divisional games come into play, or the games that become crucial to get into the playoffs. That's one component of it. But I think the second component too is keeping things fresh and exciting for the players. Even if you're in week 5 or 6 of the season, that means that you're really probably in week, 10, 4 weeks of training camp or 3 weeks of training camp. And so I think when players come into the game, I think it's our job as coaches to make sure we're stimulating those guys in lots of different ways. And that's always a challenge, but that's always a fun part too.
Definitely. And as I said, a lot of different ways to do that. When you look at this time, how much is the balance maybe of looking at, okay, we could cut down on this part of the drill. Obviously receivers, right? You want to cut down the running, maybe working more top of the route, or, find points of the break, et cetera. Quarterbacks, you want to keep their arms live. Definitely don't want them, throwing extremely much. It's just all about timing. Offensive line, taking some of the hits off of them. So I think there's a lot of things you could do, from the head coach deciding he's going to shorten up periods to taking a look at how you're doing your individual or group or even team periods. What kind of things do you focus on, again, to lighten the load up and keep those guys fresh physically?
I think the first thing, that you do is you mentioned it. How much hitting are we doing at this point, and how much hitting do we need to do? Do we need to run a 9-on-7 drill? Do we need to run an inside, run drill? Do we need to do a 3-spot drill at that point in the season? So I think it's managed by, one, your injuries, what your team is like, how fresh are they, how healthy are they? That's the first component. I think the second thing that you balance into that equation is, are we playing a team that is similar to the opponents that we've played in the past? Do they run similar concepts, similar plays? Or are we facing a team that, requires more practice time? Maybe you're playing an option team and you haven't faced an option team all year. Maybe you're playing a run and shoot team that is up tempo and you just haven't seen that much of that as the course has gone on, 4 wide sets. So I think those factors in how healthy your team is, what type of offense and defense you're facing. And I think that where you begin to tailor down on terms of the physical part of the game, I think there's 2 things that you can't sacrifice. The first is you can't sacrifice time for fundamentals. Fundamentals they're the same whether you're 5 years old, you're 15 years old, or you're 25 years old, and those will never change. And I think sometimes, I know I have in the past, we as coaches have made the mistake of cutting individual, because that's the first thing that we want to cut. We want to get the scheme in, we want to get the team periods in, and I would advocate that in my experience, you got to stay with the fundamental focus, and you can't cut that. So then you ask yourself the question, well, then where do we cut, right? And so you start to say, well, can I replace a team period with a jog-through or a walk-through? Do I make my practices flow a little bit so that there's an individual focus, then there's a full team period, and then you tone it down to where it's a glorified jog-through, and then you amp it back up to where it's another team period? I think that's where we can be creative as coaches it's hard to do an entire practice as a walkthrough. So I think that's one of the things is can we take some of the running and the pounding off and the hitting off? And I think one of the best ways to do that is by substituting some jog-through or walk-through periods within your practices. I think you've always got to be conscious of play count, how many reps you're getting in practice. And I think you need to have a plan for that that's flexible as the year goes on. You know, how many team reps do you want them to get? I also think it's really different based on position. And this is something that you can't overlook. You know, you might be running with 3 receivers or 2 receivers on the field at a time, but those guys up front, the guys that are doing the hitting all the time, the offensive line, the defensive line, those are the guys that I think you've got to monitor the amount of contact and physical pounding that they're taking. So can you replace a team period with a skelly period? And I think those are all things that are hard to balance. Can you time up your blitzes, you know, your blitz period? And can you do that as a jog through so that from a defensive perspective, you get to see the holes and where you're trying to hit the design of the play. And from an offensive perspective, you work on your pass pro. Can you do those things in a walkthrough as opposed to going full speed? And I think that's always a challenge, but that's always something we got to be conscious of as you get into the middle part of the season.
Definitely, I agree with that. I know just looking at one area I really liked to move to, especially as the season went on, was more from, you know, getting away from the inside run, which typically is a 9-on-7 drill, to more of a run with some mix of maybe some play action and RPO mixed in there. That just the factor of when the defense knows that it's not just run, they're not selling out that some of the hit comes out of it just because they have to play keys. They can't just sell out to one thing. And I know that always, our linemen liked it, definitely. That kind of preserve things. Is that something you ascribe to or you've done before?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's exactly what you said. Can we substitute a team run and make it a run, play action, screen period, right? Where we mix all 3 of those and we get good work. You know, I think the other component is where can I account for the reduction in plays, right? Where do I want to take those off? And I think you have to be strategic about that. Do we need to do a 2-minute drill, or are we far enough along in our 2-minute drill that we don't need to have that pounding? One of the things that I saw when I was visiting the Buffalo Bills a couple of years ago, which was great, they started practice before stretch with a jog through 2-minute period. So they got the 2-minute mechanics down, getting the calls in, getting aligned, making the checks on defense. And they did that just to simulate their 2-minute operation and not do it full speed at the end of day 3 practice, which is typically when it's done. So I think, yeah, finding a way to substitute those things into, can we not just run 8 run plays in a row, but let's get 4 runs and then let's get 4 play actions, or 4 runs, 2 play actions, 2 screens, and kind of assimilate those things that you did in training camp and reduce them down. Absolutely. We've done a lot of that, and I think you have to. And I think it may change week to week. And this is one of the other things I think that I wanted to touch on a little bit is, you know, we get into this routine as coaches, and having been a head coach, I know I did it, where you follow the same practice plan every week. And the reality is that football is not played that way. So I think you can be creative within your own practice plans. You know, we're playing, you know, we've been really poor in the red zone. So we're going to have an extra period of focus on the red zone. You know, these guys are really good on short yardage. So we got to spend a little bit of time coaching on short yardage. So I think having the flexibility within your own thought process and planning of what do we need to do this week to help prepare our guys the best for what they're going to see. It might be totally different than what you did last week. And I think there's got to be some flexibility in that because, again, every week poses a different challenge, a different set of circumstances, a different defense, a different offense, a different set of special teams. And maybe you haven't been as good in an area. And so that middle part of the season really gives you time to focus in on some of the things that you haven't been doing well, that you need more work in, or that you just need to help prepare for that upcoming opponent.
I think that's a really good point that, we get to this time of the year, we certainly have that cumulative effect of the reps that we've put in since camp on some of these plays. Some of those plays have been repped hundreds of times, and do we need to keep adding to that, or can we get more prescriptive, like you said, and say, okay, now we need to look at the context of the game. The game's always played in context, right? And we work it that way in practice, but we kind of segment it into different things, and that's where, as you said, you can be prescriptive in saying, hey, we're going to give more time to this, we're going to take away time here. And just that in and of itself, I think breaking up the monotony of we're running the same practice on a Tuesday that we've run since week one helps the players mentally as well.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of those things where, you come in and it's not the same routine. It's different. It's fresh. And I, as a player, now feel like you truly are helping me. The coach staff is really helping us put us in the best situation possible. And also, I think if you look at reducing the practice, right, we've always talked about these things as a staff is what is the day to take the load off, right? If you played on Saturday and you plan on having a heavy Monday practice, right, or just a light Monday jog-through, is Tuesday a heavy day, Wednesday a lighter day, Thursday a heavy day, or do you do 2 heavy days on Tuesday and Wednesday and then ease back on Thursday? Those are all the discussions that have to be in an ebb and flow as the season goes on. And again, I think it's based on the situation with your team. I know this past year, as the season went on, we would do a Tuesday heavy practice where we would call day 1, day 2 would be lighter, and then day 3 would be a little heavier, full speed, but not as many reps, right? As we got into those weeks where you were banged up a little bit. But again, I think it's dependent on your philosophy, first and foremost, and the health of your team.
Moving into the mental side of things and keeping it fresh on the mental side, part of it is maybe being able to add those wrinkles, but I don't think you blindly add those. I think it always goes back to you're scouting the opponent in the self-scout. You're going to have tendencies that you've built up now along the season and have to make a decision. What do I do with these? Am I breaking them? Am I building them longer? Do I want to break them in this game or that? So what approach do you take to really putting that all together, that what it really comes down to is as you add a wrinkle here or there, you're also engaging their minds a little bit too, because it is a little bit new and different, yet you've built on the teaching that you laid down in camp?
It's a real good question and a challenge sometimes, because as coaches, we want to create new plays, right? And one of the things that's always, and I don't want to say new plays, but a concept that fits in that week against that opponent. The challenge always that we all have to look back on is say, okay, as we're looking to cut some practice reps, how many reps are our guys going to truly get at this play? And I know I've made the mistake at times of putting in a play and a concept that is going to work great against the defense, but you look back at the end of the week and you say, after you've called the game, you say, man, those guys only got 2 looks at that, and they saw it versus this coverage, and they didn't see it versus that coverage. And so I think that's the first thing that you have to ask. So I break it down this way. What new concepts are we trying to put in? And then I think what we can all, at least I'm going to speak for myself, what I can do a better job of is looking back at the things that we have run and building as many complements off of those. So this is what the opponents have seen. This is what they're anticipating. These are the things that we've run out of these formations, these looks. Let's just put a little wrinkle that's a little bit different off of a very similar look. And I think that's really important. And that's probably sometimes more beneficial than just putting in a new concept or a new play. So factor in what we can do, wrinkles off of the things that opponents have seen, what new concepts can we put in. And then I think that as we get into the later parts of the season where there's more games to watch, the tendency as coaches is to now focus on looking at 6 games. Maybe your breakdown is based off of the last 3 games or 4 games, but we all as coaches go back and watch the other games. The problem with that as the season goes on is there's less and less self-scout that we do, right? And from an offensive perspective, I know those guys on defense are looking at alignments. Why is this guy a little bit different? Going back and looking at what your quarterback does, because believe me, they all have patterns and they all have tells. And those guys on the other side of the ball, from a defensive perspective, they're just looking for that. How many times does that quarterback, wipe his hands on his towel when it's a run as opposed to when it's a pass? When we have the back offset and his crotch is splitting the outside leg of the guard, what do we run when now he's stacked a little wider on the tackle, right? And so those are the things that I think really need to happen in week 5, 6, and 7, is to go back and do a really good, deep self-scout on any of those little tendencies that start to show and creep up. And the third thing, so, you got your new concepts, you got your wrinkles off of things that you've done. Then I think you start looking at your base offense and saying, how can we run these same plays from a reduced split? So it doesn't, and that's all tied into the self-scouting, I mentioned, how can we run, this quick out from a reduced split so it looks different? And how am I going to marry my packages so that I want to run the same things that we've been running, but I'm just going to give it a different formation look, a different split look, a different emotion look, a different shift look, whatever you're doing. That's where I've tended to focus my energy in the middle of the season. At times I've been way too heavy on new concepts and new plays because that's the fun part of what we do. We love to come up with new wrinkles, new ideas. That's a creative part of what we do. But I think that you always have to balance that by how many reps am I going to get at this new play.
Definitely. I think it's a huge consideration. I always said, I realized, and I've talked about this on the podcast before, realized at some point in my career that all these things that we think, are good on a Sunday afternoon as we're breaking down film and getting the game plan ready for the next Saturday is we get around to it. And like you said, you don't get enough of the reps. And then I'm not comfortable calling it, or it's not, more importantly, it's not in my thought process because it didn't completely fit. And so you have to be disciplined about that. I got much better about just being upfront with coaches when they'd bring something to the table and just saying, well, how can we fit it within what we do? Because if it just stands out here like this, I'm probably not going to call it, right? And helping them understand that process as well. Because I didn't want to kill ideas. I love getting ideas, but at the same time, I think that for them, I wanted that, some of these young coaches, that needs to be your filter. How does it fit into what we do already?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great point because you do want ideas. You want to feel that, make everybody feel that they've got input. Sometimes that can be tougher based on your working parameters and, mandates from, the head coach or, from time constraints or anything like that. But the best is when everybody is collaborating, putting ideas together, but yet you as a play caller have to make sure that you're comfortable with it. And sometimes you just don't see how it fits, where you just aren't comfortable calling a play. And that, all of us are going to get a chance to sit in that chair one day and we'll all understand you from a play calling perspective, you truly got to believe in it. That being said, I will say that one of the things I always wanted young coaches to do, and I know that, Kenny Dorsey used to do this for me when he was the fourth string quarterback or third string quarterback in Toronto up in the CFL. It was my first year as a coordinator. And heck, I didn't know what I was doing back then, but Kenny would always come in with 10, 12 plays. And, some days I'd say, that's great. Tell me about this one. Okay, where are you seeing this one? How are we reading this? And, to Kenny's credit, and that's why he's so successful and been so successful, is he was never fazed by a rejection. But one of the things he mentioned to me later was, you always ask me, well, how's the quarterback going to read this? Well, what are we going to do in this coverage? Okay, well, why do you like this? And with young coaches, everybody's got ideas. I think, show me the clip that you saw it on tape where you like it. And then show me what we're going to do against, these coverages, because these are the main things that we're getting, or this front, and kind of put more ownership on the young coaches to not only bring a play idea, but to give you some evidence on film where the play might work and to think of how it's going to look outside that one individual look that they got it off of, I think that's always beneficial. I know people did that for me when I was younger because we all got ideas. Some of them just fit better than others. And again, our job as coordinators is to assimilate everybody's ideas, make them feel like they're part of the game plan because they need to be. And then at the end of the day, we're the ones that got to call it. But I think the more that guys can dive back into looking at their own position and their own tells and their own tendencies, that the more beneficial that is for the entire offense, at least.
In looking at the bigger picture, complementary football is something now really becoming a buzzword. Not that we never did it before, but we did move through this era where it was about the offense running as fast as they can. And I know you guys got some pretty fast communication systems in the XFL, but there's still, especially as you get towards the later season and those crucial games, you do have to think about the game management. And I know a lot of that falls on the head coach, but certainly as an offensive coordinator, I think you need to be thinking about it too. I think you need to be aware of what your defensive coordinator feels are some needs as well. What recommendations do you have for really being able to work together with the rest of the staff to figure out, from a bigger perspective, how do we need to think about this game?
That is a great question. And I do think it starts with the head coach. I think it's the head coach that has, meeting with the coordinators and, as the game plan through the week and as the game plan is set, the good ones I've been around, we did that. The night before game, hey guys, how do we see this game? How do we see this? And we're all in our silos when we're going through the week. And I mean, offensive, defensively, we might, hey, I need this look, or hey, can you bring me this blitz? But I think it's really beneficial when the night before game, we all get in a room and we all know how we anticipate this game is going to go. Hey guys, we're going to struggle on defense, stopping these guys. They're really talented. We're going to have to score a lot of points, so we're going to stay aggressive on offense. You got to throw the ball downfield. I'm going to go for it on some fourth downs. Okay, now we're all in the right frame of mind as to how this game is going to go. I think that first part of that discussion needs to be had during the week and then definitely the night before game. I think the second thing, and I'll give you this example, and I know that the Ravens use this color code system, and to communicate amongst the coordinators, and let's just say we're in a situation where it's kind of a 4-minute game, a 3-minute game. We're on offense. We're up by 2 or 3 points, and we get the ball back. Well, they use a color system that's, from my understanding, is as simple as red, yellow, and green, right? So the head coach talks to the defense coordinator based on how that game in the second half has gone. He tells the offense coordinator, hey, we're in red mode here, so we're going to run it 3 times, and if we have to punt, we'll punt. We feel pretty good about our defense stopping these guys if we give them the ball back. Hey, we're in yellow mode here. If you need to throw it, let's just throw something smart, make a quick game, something that, is high percentage. Okay. Or we're in green mode. Hey, we can't give the ball back to the defense. You're going to have to win the game, so be aggressive. Throw it on first down if you want. Yeah, and I think communicating with that color system makes things a lot easier and makes us play complementary football. And I think you can use that not just in a 3-minute scenario, but I think you can use that before the half as the game is an ebb and flow. I think it's a really good way to communicate. And that's really a head coach's job, right, to go back and forth. If a head coach is a play caller as well, then I think it's a little bit more complicated, but I love that as a way to make sure you play complementary football. Discussions through the week, color code system on game day.
Coach, some great suggestions here today. I love that, the different ideas, the different perspectives you brought to this, and important things at this time of the year. And I certainly appreciate you coming back on the podcast, and we'll have to make sure we don't wait a year in between the next one.
Definitely. I'm always here for you guys. I really appreciate you having me on. Keep doing your thing. This podcast is really growing. It's fun to listen to. You got so many talented coaches on here. I enjoy listening to it and really, really excited for what you're building, man. Keep it going.
Thank you for listening to the Coaching Coordinator Season Series. We will continue to bring you timely ideas and insight to help you throughout the season. Check the description for the link to Coach Elizondo's previous episode, which also addressed in-season topics, and check your favorite podcast app or coachingcoordinator.com for the entire catalog of season episodes. You can sign up at coachingcoordinator.com for a weekly tips sheet, which runs down the ideas shared during the previous week.